The Awakening. The Celestial Sentinel hung suspended in the vast orbital shipyard of Proxima Station, its silver-blue hull gleaming under the artificial lights like a slumbering leviathan. Nearly 2 miles long, the warship represented the pinnacle of achievement for the Galactic Accord, an alliance of 12 advanced species who had pooled their technological brilliance to create the most formidable vessel ever constructed. Admiral Thrix, a tall Volari with iridescent scales and penetrating amber eyes, stood at the observation deck, his 4-fingered hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the magnificent ship. 6 months of testing, 6 months of the finest pilots from across the galaxy attempting to activate the vessel's full capabilities, and 6 months of frustrating failure. "It simply doesn't make logical sense," said Chief Engineer Zol, a diminutive Mektari whose large cranium housed one of the most brilliant minds in the quadrant. "The Sentinel systems are flawless. The neural interfaces respond to initial commands, but the core systems remain dormant." Admiral Thrix's jaw tightened. "And yet here we are, with a 12 trillion credit warship that refuses to fully power, up for any pilot we've tried." "Perhaps," came a melodic voice from behind them. "That is because you have not tried the right species yet." Both turned to see Ambassador Lyria, the Ashanti representative to the Accord. Her translucent skin glowed with a soft blue luminescence, a sign of thoughtful consideration among her kind. "You cannot still be suggesting we bring in a human," Thrix said, not bothering to hide his disdain. "That is precisely what I am suggesting," Lyria replied calmly. "The ship's quantum core was designed with elements of ancient technology recovered from the Epsilon ruins. We know so little about that civilization, but what we do know is that they had contact with Earth during humanity's early development." Ul shook his head, his bulbous cranium wobbling slightly. "Humans are unpredictable, emotional, and barely a century into their interstellar phase. Their inclusion in the Accord was a political decision, not a practical one." "And yet," Lyria countered, "they have accomplished more in that century than many species do in a millennium. There is something unique about them." Admiral Thrix stared at the Sentinel, weighing the options. The Merconian threat was growing at the borders of Accord space. They needed this ship operational, and soon. "Fine," he finally said. "Make the arrangements, but I want our best people monitoring everything. If there's even a hint of trouble, we pull the human out." 3 days later, Commander Alara Hayes stepped through the airlock onto Proxima Station. At 34, she was one of Earth's most decorated Space Force pilots with a reputation for doing the impossible. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes took in everything with a measured calm that belied her inner excitement. She had been briefed about the Celestial Sentinel, of course, but standing in its shadow now, she felt a strange pull toward it that no briefing could have prepared her for. It was as if the ship was calling to her specifically. "Commander Hayes," Admiral Thrix said stiffly, offering the traditional Accord greeting with a slight bow. "Welcome to Proxima Station, Admiral." Alara returned the gesture perfectly, her diplomatic training evident. "Thank you for the opportunity. I understand there have been difficulties with the Sentinel." "An understatement," Zol interjected, studying her with unabashed curiosity. "The ship refuses full integration with any pilot we've provided. Ambassador, Lyria believes you might succeed where others have failed." Ilara glanced at the Ashanti ambassador, who offered a gentle nod of encouragement. "I'd like to see the command interface," Ilara said simply. The command center of the Celestial Sentinel was a marvel of ergonomic design. A semicircular control area surrounded by holographic displays, centered around a single pilot's chair that seemed to float on an invisible pedestal. Neural interface nodes extended from the headrest like delicate silver tendrils. 12 of our best pilots have attempted integration," Zol explained, running his 6-fingered hand over a console. "All achieved basic functions, life support, rudimentary navigation, minor defensive systems. None could access the quantum core or the primary weapons array." Alara approached the chair slowly, feeling that strange pull growing stronger with each step. The air seemed to vibrate around her, though she knew the others couldn't feel it. "The neural interface is calibrated for multiple species," Zol continued, including human neurological patterns. There should be no physical incompatibility. It's not about compatibility, Ilara murmured almost to herself. It's about connection. Before anyone could stop her, she settled into the pilot's seat. The neural tendrils immediately descended, gently touching her temples and the base of her skull. Ilara closed her eyes, expecting the standard disorientation of a neural link. What happened instead shook her to her core. The ship exploded into her consciousness, not as a machine, not as a computer interface, but as a presence. Ancient, powerful, and somehow familiar. It wasn't just that the ship recognized her, it was as if it had been waiting for her specifically. Around the command center, dormant systems flared to life. Holographic displays that had remained dim despite the best efforts of alien engineers now blazed with information. The ship's quantum core, visible through a transparent floor section, began to pulse with a deep blue light that grew in intensity with each moment. Impossible, Zol whispered, his scientific detachment crumbling as he watched the readouts on his portable scanner. The core is operating at 100% efficiency. All systems are coming online. Admiral Thrix's eyes narrowed. What are you doing, Commander? Ilara's eyes opened, but they were distant, seeing things beyond the physical space around her. I'm not doing anything, Admiral. The ship is welcoming me. Through the neural link, information flooded into Ilara's mind, not as raw data, but as intuitive understanding. The Celestial Sentinel wasn't just a warship. It contained technology salvaged from the Epsilon ruins, technology that was designed to interface with human consciousness specifically. The Epsilon civilization, Ilara, said, her voice carrying a strange resonance. They knew humans. They visited Earth thousands of years ago. They saw something in our ancestors that they recognized and valued. Ambassador Lyria stepped forward, her luminescence brightening with excitement. What did they see, Commander? Unpredictability, Ilara replied. Creativity, the ability to make intuitive leaps beyond logical progression. They called it the chaos factor, and they built it into this ship's core operating principles. Admiral Thrix frowned deeply. Are you saying this ship was designed to be piloted by humans? That makes no sense. Humans weren't even a spacefaring species when the Epsilon civilization disappeared. They were planning for the future, Ilara explained as more information unfolded in her mind. They knew they were facing extinction, but they hoped humanity would one day reach the stars. They left and gifts. This ship is one of them. The revelation settled over the room like a heavy shroud. The implications were staggering. An ancient advanced civilization had recognized potential in primitive humans and had designed technology specifically for them, technology that even the collective brilliance of 12 advanced species couldn't fully utilize. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the command center. The ship's sensors had detected something approaching at incredible speed, a distortion in space-time that defied conventional understanding. What is that? Thrix demanded, moving to a secondary console. Ilara's eyes widened as the ship shared its analysis through their connection. It's a void fracture, a tear in the fabric of reality. According to the ship's historical database, the Epsilon civilization encountered them before their extinction. Through the massive forward viewport, they watched as space itself seemed to ripple and tear, revealing a swirling darkness punctuated by flashes of energy that hurt the eyes to look at directly. Sensors indicate it's expanding, Zol reported, his voice tight with fear. At its current rate of growth, it will engulf Proxima Station within 3 hours. Admiral Thrix's face hardened. Evacuate the station. Alert the Accord fleet. There's no time, Ilara said, her connection to the ship growing stronger by the moment. The Sentinel knows what this is. It was built to face these void fractures. The ship isn't even fully tested, Thrix argued. Nevertheless, it's ready, Ilara replied, with a certainty that brooked no argument. And so am I. The neural link deepened, and Ilara felt the Sentinel's ancient technology merging more completely with her consciousness. Systems that had lain dormant for millennia, awakened to her presence, her thoughts, her human intuition. "I need a skeleton." "Crew," she announced. "Voluntary only. We're taking the Sentinel to meet that fracture before it destroys the station." Admiral Thrix hesitated, torn between protocol and necessity. Finally, he nodded grimly. "You have 1 hour to prepare. I'll assemble volunteers." As the others hurried to make preparations, Ambassador Lyria remained behind, studying Alara with newfound respect. "The Epsilon civilization saw something in humans that we missed," she said softly. "Something worth preserving, worth building into their most advanced technology." Alara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, along with an exhilarating sense of purpose. "And now we have to prove they were right." 53 minutes later, the Celestial Sentinel detached from its moorings, its engines glowing with an otherworldly light as Alara guided it toward the expanding void fracture. Through her connection with the ship, she understood what needed to be done, not through instruction manuals or training, but through a deeper, almost instinctive knowledge that the ancient builders had somehow encoded into the vessel's systems. The small crew of volunteers, the bravest from various Accord species, watched in awe as human and ship moved as one, heading directly into the face of an unknowable threat that had once helped destroy one of the most advanced civilizations in galactic history. As they approached the fracture, its swirling darkness seeming to consume the very stars around it, Alara felt a strange calm. The Sentinel had chosen her, had waited for humanity to reach the stars, and now together they would face a threat beyond logical comprehension, exactly as the Epsilon civilization had intended. "Take us in," she commanded both verbally and through the neural link. "Let's show the galaxy what humans and their friends can do." The Celestial Sentinel plunged toward the heart of darkness, carrying with it the legacy of an ancient civilization and the hopes of a new alliance, guided by the unique human spark that an extinct race had recognized long before humanity reached for the stars. The revelation. The Celestial Sentinel accelerated toward the void fracture, its quantum engines pushing the massive warship to speeds that defied conventional physics. Through the neural interface, Alara could feel the ancient technology responding to her commands, not with mechanical precision, but with an almost intuitive synchronicity. "The fracture is growing more unstable," reported Zoll from the science station, his bulbous cranium reflecting the pulsing emergency lights. "Energy readings are off the conventional scale." On the main view screen, the void fracture loomed larger, a wound in reality that seemed to swallow light itself. Around its edges, space twisted and folded in ways that made the eyes hurt to observe directly. "What exactly is your plan, Commander?" Admiral Thrix asked, his voice tight with controlled tension. Ilara's hands danced across the control interface, but much of her interaction with the ship occurred through the neural link, a symphony of thought and intention rather than physical commands. "The Sentinel is showing me," she replied, her eyes reflecting the swirling energies of the ship's quantum core. "The Epsilon civilization encountered these fractures before their extinction. They developed technology to seal them, stabilize the tiers in space-time." "And this technology is built into the Sentinel?" Ambassador Lyria asked, her luminescence pulsing with both fear and fascination. "Yes, but it's not just about the technology," Alara explained, understanding flowing through her from the ship's ancient database. "It's about how it's applied. The fractures don't respond to logical, predictable approaches. They're quantum anomalies that change their properties when observed and engaged." Zoll's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "Like the quantum uncertainty principle, but on a cosmic scale. The moment you deploy a solution based on observed parameters, the fracture changes," Alara finished. "That's why the Epsilon civilization designed the Sentinel to work with human pilots. Our intuitive leaps, our ability to adapt and improvise beyond logical progression, that's what the ship needs." The Sentinel shuddered as they entered the outer edge of the fracture's influence. Reality itself seemed to waver, the ship's structural integrity field straining against forces that defied conventional physics. "All hands brace for dimensional turbulence," Alara commanded through the ship-wide communication system. Through the neural link, Ilara could feel the Sentinel's ancient systems activating sequences that had lain dormant for millennia. The quantum core's pulsing intensified, sending cascades of energy through specialized conduits throughout the ship's superstructure. The ship is generating a quantum field envelope, Zol observed, his scientific precision momentarily overshadowing his fear. It's somehow matching the fracture's dimensional frequency while maintaining a stable pocket of normal space-time around us. Ilara nodded, feeling the process through her connection with the ship. We need to reach the epicenter, the point where the fracture originated. The Sentinel can deploy a resonance cascade from there, forcing the tear to close back on itself. Admiral Thrix gripped the edge of a nearby console as the ship plunged deeper into the anomaly. And you know this will work? Not with certainty, Ilara admitted. But the ship and we understand it together. This is what the Sentinel was built for. As they penetrated further into the fracture, the laws of physics became increasingly tenuous. Time itself seemed to stretch and compress randomly. Crew members reported seeing ghostly echoes of themselves performing actions moments before they actually did them. External sensors captured impossible geometries and fleeting glimpses of what might have been other dimensions bleeding through the tear. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, nearly throwing the crew from their stations despite the inertial dampeners. "Something's coming through the fracture," Zol shouted, his voice rising an octave in alarm. On the view screen, shadowy shapes began to coalesce within the void, entities that seemed to be composed of darkness given form, their edges constantly shifting and reforming. The Epsilon records call them void entities, Ilara said, accessing the ancient knowledge flowing through the neural link. They exist between dimensions, drawn to fractures like these. They can't survive in our reality for long, but they can cause immense damage while here. One of the entities surged toward the ship, its amorphous body stretching into a lance-like projection that struck the Sentinel's shields. Energy cascaded across the defensive barrier in patterns that defied conventional energy dispersal physics. Shields holding, but that attack pattern is impossible, reported a Keldari tactical officer, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid sequence, a sign of extreme stress in his species. Conventional weapons won't affect them, Ilara said, her hands moving across the controls as the ship fed information directly into her mind. The Sentinel has something else. From recessed ports along the ship's hull, strange devices deployed, crystalline, structures that pulsed with an inner light that somehow seemed darker than the void around them. As the entities approached for another attack, the crystals activated, emitting fields of energy that appeared to twist and fold space itself around the attackers. The entities recoiled, their forms distorting as if being pulled back toward the heart of the fracture. Dimensional inversion field, Ilara explained, though the words felt inadequate to describe the complex technology at work. It creates a localized space-time gradient that pushes them back toward their native dimension. Admiral Thrix watched, in astonishment as the advanced weapons kept the entities at bay. This technology, it's beyond anything in the Accord's arsenal. The Epsilon civilization was millions of years ahead of us, Ambassador Lyria said softly, and they chose to entrust this legacy to humans. As the ship pressed deeper into the fracture, fighting off void entities along the way, Ilara's connection with the Sentinel grew stronger. Through the neural interface, she began to receive not just tactical data, but fragments of memory, impressions left behind by the Epsilon engineers who had designed the vessel. They were dying, she whispered, her eyes distant as the memories unfolded in her mind. Their civilization was being consumed by these fractures appearing throughout their territory. They realized too late what was happening. What caused the fractures? Zol asked, momentarily looking up from his instruments. They did, Ilara replied, sorrow coloring her voice. The Epsilon civilization achieved technological perfection, mathematical certainty in all things. Their society operated with flawless logical precision. That sounds like an achievement, not a downfall, Admiral Thrix remarked. Ilara shook her head. The universe itself rebelled against such perfect order. Quantum uncertainty is fundamental to reality. When they removed too much of it through their technology, these fractures began appearing. Reality itself was trying to reintroduce chaos to balance their perfect order. The revelation hung in the air as the Sentinel pushed through another wave of void entities, getting closer to the fracture's epicenter. That's why they needed humans, Ambassador Lyria said, understanding dawning in her luminescent eyes. They recognized that our unpredictability, our illogical leaps and intuitive approaches, are essential to maintaining balance with the fundamental nature of reality. Ilara finished. Yes. The Epsilon civilization realized this too late to save themselves, but they created the Sentinel and other technologies as a legacy, designed to respond only to beings who embodied the chaos factor they had engineered out of their own existence. Admiral Thrix's expression shifted from skepticism to thoughtful consideration. So when we dismissed humans as too emotional, too unpredictable, you were dismissing exactly what makes us valuable, Ilara said. What makes us necessary. The ship shuddered again as they reached the heart of the fracture, a swirling maelstrom of energy and non-existence that seemed to both draw them in and push them away simultaneously. We've reached the epicenter, Zal announced, his voice barely audible over the growing vibration throughout the ship. But the readings are... I can't make sense of them. The mathematics breaks down completely. That's the point, Ilara said, feeling the Sentinel's ancient systems preparing for their purpose. This can't be solved with pure logic or perfect mathematics. The solution requires intuition, the human element. Through the neural link, Ilara could see what needed to be done, not as a series of calculations or procedures, but as a kind of dance with chaos itself. The Sentinel's quantum core began to pulse in an irregular rhythm that somehow matched the fracture's own chaotic fluctuations. "What are you doing?" Admiral Thrix demanded as warning lights flashed across control panels. "Improvising," Ilara replied, with a small smile that belied the intense concentration required to guide the ship's systems. "The fracture responds to perfect patterns by changing its nature. So we're being deliberately imperfect, introducing controlled chaos to our approach." The crystalline devices extended further from the ship's hull, forming a complex three-dimensional array around the vessel. Energy began to flow between them, not in the precise patterns of typical Accord technology, but in seemingly random surges and ebbs that nonetheless formed a larger pattern, one that mirrored yet disrupted the fracture's own chaotic nature. "The resonance cascade is beginning," Ilara announced, her consciousness now so deeply merged with the ship that it was becoming difficult to distinguish where her thoughts ended and the Sentinel's systems began. "But I need to guide it manually. The pattern can't be programmed, it has to be felt." The crew watched in awe as Ilara's hands moved across the controls in what appeared to be an improvisational pattern, while the neural interface glowed with increasing intensity. The energy flowing through the crystalline array responded, shifting and changing in ways that no algorithm could have predicted, yet somehow perfectly countered the fracture's expansion. At the heart of the fracture, reality itself began to fold inward, the tear in space-time slowly closing like the healing of a wound. "It's working," Zol whispered, his scientific mind struggling to comprehend how such an apparently chaotic approach could yield such precise results. The void entities sensed the closing of their gateway and surged toward the ship in a final, desperate attack. The Sentinel's defensive systems responded instantly, guided by Ilara's intuitive commands rather than programmed responses. Where conventional tactics would have failed against the unpredictable entities, the human-guided systems adapted and countered in real time. As the last of the entities were forced back through the narrowing fracture, the ship's quantum core reached peak intensity. The crystalline array pulsed once more, sending a final cascade of energy into the heart of the anomaly. With a silent implosion that nonetheless shook the Sentinel to its structural foundations, the void fracture collapsed and sealed itself, leaving behind only normal space and a fading ripple of exotic particles. Ilara slumped in the command chair, the neural interface gently retracting from her temples. The connection with the ship remained, but at a less overwhelming intensity. Around the command center, the crew stared in disbelief at the now ordinary starfield on the view screen. "You did it," Admiral Thrix said, genuine respect in his voice for perhaps the first time. Ilara shook her head slowly. We did it. The ship and I together, and all of you who took the risk to come on this mission. As the Celestial Sentinel began its return journey to Proxima Station, Ambassador Lyria approached Ilara, her luminescence glowing with a warm, respectful light. The Accord Council will need to re-evaluate many of their assumptions, she said. About humans, about our approach to technology, about our place in the universe itself. The Epsilon civilization left us more than just advanced technology, Ilara replied, feeling the ship's gentle presence in her mind. They left us a message about balance, about the need for both logical precision and intuitive chaos. Neither alone is sufficient. Admiral Thrix, overhearing, nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that is why the Accord has faced limitations despite our combined technological prowess. We've prioritized perfect order over creative chaos. And perhaps, Zol added, his scientific mind already racing with new possibilities. That is why the Sentinel responds to human pilots. Not because humans are superior, but because they provide what the rest of us have engineered away from our societies over millennia of development. As the Sentinel docked at Proxima Station several hours later, news of its success had already spread throughout the Accord. The implications were profound, not just the discovery of the ancient Epsilon legacy and the threat of the void fractures, but the revelation about humanity's unique role in the cosmic balance. Standing on the observation deck once more, Ilara gazed at the Sentinel, feeling its presence even at a distance. The ship had chosen her, had waited millennia for humanity to reach the stars, not because humans were destined to rule or conquer, but because they embodied a principle that the universe itself required, the chaos factor that brought balance to order. What happens now? She asked quietly as Admiral Thrix and Ambassador Lyria joined her. The Accord Council is already convening an emergency session, Thrix replied. There are reports of other fractures appearing at the edges of known space. We'll need more ships like the Sentinel, more human pilots trained to connect with them. And more understanding between our species, Lyria added. The humans bring something essential that we had forgotten, or perhaps never truly valued. Ilara nodded, her gaze still fixed on the magnificent ship that had changed everything. The Epsilon civilization left us a gift, but also a responsibility. To maintain the balance between order and chaos, between logical progression and intuitive leaps. As if in response, the Sentinel's quantum core pulsed once with a brilliant blue light visible even through the ship's hull, an acknowledgement, a promise, a beacon for a new era of cooperation among the stars. Ambassador Lyria's voice was soft but carried a weight of prophecy. The starship that chose humanity may have just saved us all, not by making us more like humans but by reminding us of what we all once were, before we engineered the chaos from our souls in pursuit of perfect order. Admiral Thrix, ever practical, straightened his uniform. The first joint human Accord fleet will need a commander, someone who understands both the technology and the philosophy behind it. He turned to Ilara, extending his hand in the human gesture of partnership, a significant concession from the proud Volari. The Celestial Sentinel has chosen you, Commander Hayes. Will you help us choose a new path forward? Ilara took his hand, feeling the weight of history and possibility in the simple gesture. Together, she said, with a little order and a little chaos, exactly as the universe intended. As night fell over Proxima Station, the Sentinel's soft blue glow illuminated the darkness. Not just a warship, but a bridge between species, between philosophies, between past and future. A reminder that sometimes the universe chooses unlikely, heroes not for their perfection but for their perfect imperfection.